Welcome, everybody. Tonight, I'd like to ask our current administrators to, first I'd like to call to order tonight's meeting.
What a good
Sorry.
idea.
And may I have a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
You may, so move.
Thank you. And I'm just excited about all of the new people we have coming to our school. So I'm hoping that our current administrators will welcome them and introduce them. Peter? Sure, that would be great. So we can get a face and a name.
And the viewing public.
We want to welcome Jamie Bailey. Jamie's the new assistant principal at Cyrus Pierce. And she arrived on island last week and got started right away. So she's getting up to speed, and she comes to us from most recently working in Winchester, Massachusetts. And we're excited to have her. And Jamie Bailey.
Welcome.
Jamie, please stand. Stand. Thank you.
There you go.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Michelle?
I want to introduce Robin Altman Sherman, the new Assistant Director of Special Education, and she is joining us from the Cape Cod Technical High Schools in Nantucket.
Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you. All right. Any comments from the public tonight? No comments. Okay. Presentations and discussions. Kelly,
Oh,
you're up
Okay.
for ELL PAC update, please.
Okay, so I was asked to give a English Learner Parent Advisory Council update, and I decided to kind of give a larger update about the Look Act, because now English Learner Parent Advisory Councils are part of state law. So, what is the Look Act? It's the Language Opportunity for Our Kids Act, and it's designed to improve the educational programming for English language learners, and the guidance about parent advisory councils is one small part of it, but kind of a large part. So up until now, some school systems had very active parent advisory councils, some school systems not so much. Before I came, we had a parent advisory council for the English language learners, but Jeremiah had told me that many of the meetings, it was kind of just 3 parents who would attend, and that there was some difficulty getting momentum. And last year, what we did for our meetings is we invited the lawyers to come to talk about immigration largely, is what we kind of got together. We also took a survey and found out that the parents are interested in immigration, and they're also interested in workshops about how to navigate the schools, and they're also interested in doing fun things. So by the time we got that information, spring was upon us. And now that I understand how things work in Nantucket, I know now that spring is not a good time because our parents all are back to work again. And that's important for them to be able to support their families. So for this year, we're planning more proactive workshops, office hours. We have a new position. Jocelyn Ramirez is our bilingual support specialist. So she will be having workshops with parents, helping to build the parent advisory councils. And that's now part of our law, that we should be doing that. So we'll talk about the law a little bit more, then I'll connect back to how we're approaching it. So there are 4 parts. I'm going to go focus on parent advisory council. I will touch on the other points just because I think it's important that we talk about this new law. Next, please. So English learner parent advisory councils, districts require them if you have 100 or more English language learners, or greater than 5% of the population is English learners, and we of course have that. And the council shall receive assistance from the director or other appropriate school personnel as designated by the superintendent. So what's kind of interesting here is the guidance, and they're working on the guidance. So the law exists, and the state is working on the regulations for the different aspects of the law. And they want, it's interesting, they want us, the directors, to teach the parents about how to have really active parent advisory councils. So from the advocate part of my job, I'm very, very excited. They want us to teach our English learner parents their rights, their civil rights, and they want them to eventually be coming to the school committee and advocating for the children. So we know that sometimes that might put us in questions of that's not the status quo and this isn't the way we normally do things. So I think it's fascinating that state law is actually asking us to empower our parents to have a voice so that they can make a change for what's best for their kids. So I really commend Baker's administration for that. Next. So they have to create bylaws regarding officers and operational procedures, which I know nothing about. So most of us L directors are asking the state for assistance in that because I don't know how to create bylaws for how to run a governmental like group similar to school committee. We want them to advise the school district, school committee, and board of trustees on matters related to English learners. So that means we're looking for a level of understanding of what English learner rights are and what programming looks like. And so that'll be interesting because that's something that will have to grow in our population. And we also want, or the state wants, LPACs to meet regularly with school district leaders to participate in the planning and development of programs to improve educational opportunities for English learners. So it's kind of interesting that the government's asking us to do this. Usually it's the other way around. So it's exciting. Next. Also to advise the district on any new ELE, English Learner Education programs before they're submitted. Participate in the review of district and any school improvement plans as they relate to English learners. And meet at least annually with the school committee or school council. It's kind of exciting. Next. So on Nantucket, our LPAC has been very informal. We had the immigrations this past year. We do have 30 interested parents, as I said, who would like to start doing other things. So that's exciting. We're going to build off of that. And then starting this year, we do have a bilingual support specialist who will support me in supporting the parents to create this PAC. So part of creating an LPAC means that we have to have a high level of trust. And it's kind of hard for some of our families who may feel a little bit, not all of our families are legal. So it kind of makes things a little bit difficult when you're working with a group of people who might not feel completely safe coming to schools, let alone coming and complaining or advocating for things to be done differently. So creating this LPAC will be a little bit different here than it may be in a much larger system where we would have 120,000 families to pull from, some of whom will have been here forever. And with, go to Brockton, you have Cape Verdeans, fourth generation, who are there, who are strong advocates and politically connected. It's a little bit easier to have that kind of parent advisory council because people are secure politically, financially, and legally. So it'll be interesting here, but I'm excited about it. So hopefully by the end of this school year, we will have someone or some parents reporting to the school committee on how they see things in Nantucket and what their hopes and dreams are for their kids, and to help us understand best how we can serve their kids, because ultimately our jobs are to service children. So I think it's exciting. The other parts of the law that are kind of exciting is before November, in order to have a dual language program in Massachusetts, you had to have a waiver. Some school systems did have waivers, so we had dual language in Framingham, Brockton, Cambridge, Boston. I started one in Southbridge a year ago. It was easier when you're in turnaround to do it. With the new law, you don't have to have a waiver anymore. So now dual language and transitional bilingual programs are back on the plate. There's just guidance for it. Yeah, it's super exciting, especially for people with little kids, right? Your kids can grow up bilingual. So there's some guidance. I won't go into the nitty-gritty details, but it is something for Nantucket to think about. If Nantucket would like a dual language program. If they do, the department, pretty much whether the district decides to have a steering committee to look into it or whether parents request it, the requests go to the superintendent, and then the superintendent can approve. And if they don't go along with the proposal, the superintendent doesn't, then you have to report to the state. And then the state has 90 days to review your plan and tell you if you can go ahead and have a dual language or a transitional bilingual ed program. The reason for this oversight is in the past, a lot of our bilingual ed programs didn't work, but there was no oversight, and so different schools did it differently, and there wasn't wasn't systematic, and it wasn't necessarily based on research. So now the state's kind of overseeing, if you want one, then they want to make sure that you have a pretty sturdy plan in place and a long-term plan to implement, that it's not just kind of a decision that someone makes one day and tries to implement within 6 months. Next is, so parents can request a program as well. So a district could have a steering committee. That's what we did in Southbridge, or parents can If parents of 20 or more students request the implementation, they may do so, but it's ultimately the superintendent's decision to move forward or not. Next. The next part of the look bill is our principals and teachers are aware of opt-out and FEL monitoring. Now we will be monitoring English language learners who do not make progress on access, progress as determined by state measures. So that's going to be new this year. We're going to have to implement, I forget within how many days, it might say here, I think it's by January, we're going to have to show that we're starting to do this. So it'll require, similar to like an RTI form or a FEL monitoring form, that there's a team of people looking at the students and that implementations have been put in place. And that's part of ESSA and the look bill. Next. Also new is pre-Ks. Last year, we screened our pre-K students, which was exciting. NES's pre-K staff got trained and they took it on. We didn't have to do it with any time period. And even though we screened them, they didn't count as Ls in our head count, which kind of stinks or stunk because Title III monies could be used for pre-K, but we couldn't count their numbers, which would give us more Title III money. Not so much here because we don't have a ton of kids in pre-K, but in bigger districts where you have 500 kids in pre-K, you want them to count because you get money based on head count. As of this year, we are counting our pre-Ks in our census, as they call it, our SIMS data. So however many of our Ls are pre-K, they will count in our overall numbers. We also now only have 10 days instead of 30 to screen, identify, and notify parents of entry into an L program. And since we're under coordinated program review, I'm a little bit nervous about that this year. But I have talked to Dr. Bucky and Dr. Cohen, and at least in those two schools, we have teachers who one of their periods will be attending to those sorts of things, so that we'll have that definitely covered. Elementary is a little bit different because of programming, so not as easy to do. Next new thing, this is voluntary. This is the last slide. All the others are not voluntary, it's the law. This is super exciting, this part of the bill. This part of the bill is a lot of the political backing. They tacked everything else on, but people were really pushing for the seal of biliteracy. So seal of biliteracy is a little seal that would go on our students' diplomas saying that the student is biliterate in a foreign language. So for our kids who grew up speaking English first, this is exciting. We have many students in Nantucket who are in advanced placement Spanish. We have all those kids who are in Chinese. Super exciting. They would, if they pass their MCAS and they get a certain score on the Chinese proficiency test or the French or Spanish proficiency test, they would get the seal of biliteracy. I think right now we're at about 35 states in the nation that have it. Super exciting. Across the board, people are trying to make sure that our kids' diplomas are a little bit more practical. So this is definitely a step in that direction. For English language learners, it means a certain MCAS score and also their native language test. Right now, a lot of us are fighting with that because a French proficiency test is a lot easier than the MCAS. Right, so you can get a level 3 on a French proficiency test if you can order well and do your passé composé, what do you call it, agreement, very grammatical, as opposed to the MCAS when you have to read and analyze literature. So right now, that these guidelines aren't secure, but the law is there, and they've asked districts to start working on what the criteria will be. I've asked Dr. Bucky to work with his world language department to see if they are interested in this, and if they are, I of course will help them. We'll see what happens this year with it, but I think it would be a great move for Nantucket. And I think that's it, right? The end. Any questions?
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you
You're
so
welcome.
much. Thank you, Steve. Any questions?
Negative.
All right. Zona?
I have lots of questions, but I
Oh.
want to table and save them to talk to Kelly individually, if you don't mind. Sure. Thank you.
That's fine.
Off the record, you mean, or right now whispering
Off
in
the
my ear?
record.
Okay.
We
It's gonna
won't be
say we're
whispering.
mic'd.
No.
Okay,
Pauline?
thank you.
Yeah, I have on the record questions.
Oh, okay.
You're not getting out of here. Yeah. So the Parent Advisory Council, are you seeing that as one council for all 4 schools? So representation from elementary, intermediate? Okay.
That's how I see it now, absolutely, because we are a smallish district and a lot of our parents have kids at multiple levels.
Yeah. So I love this. I think it's great. And I know that we've had some form of parent advisory councils in the past for our EL students and families. and some of the programs began at the community school with our outreach. So I know all of what's on your plate. So the first thing that I'm concerned about is how are we as a district going to do all of this? And I see that some of this are in timelines, and I think that the huge change from 10 days to 30 days in reporting is huge. And I'm assuming it's the first 10 days of school. I don't think it's 10 days. that you
It's
can
10 days from the
go out,
second
so-
they show up.
Yeah, so
register.
that concerns me, and I'm wondering if any of this comes with additional funding. And I probably know the answer, but I will ask the question.
No, Title III is funny too. So we can't do, they won't fund LPAC because it's part of the law and it's required, but we can fund the parent workshops and the other things. So that's where it'll kind of be, we won't necessarily, like the LPAC might say, we would like to have movie night in the LGI in the winter, free, in Spanish, whatever. And then through Title III, we could call it parent outreach. So the LPAC can make those decisions and make suggestions, and then we can do things, then you could use Title III that way. But we can't use the money to like hire a consultant to get an LPAC up and running. So that's kind of tricky. But we do have, as I said, we have a new, our new bilingual support specialist is a graduate of the Nantucket Public Schools, which is super exciting. She will be taking the translator interpreter class that the community school is running for us. So that's really exciting. We're just trying to make sure that things are proactive so that we have workshops and we're teaching our parents their rights, teaching their rights for special ed, for English language learners, and helping them to navigate the system so that they can then be more involved participants and advocates for their kids. But yes, it is a ton more work,
So
this
these
law.
duties are written into that position's job description?
Some of it, but with me, so it's not that I'm just going to leave her to figure it out, but at least I have someone who can help me with that because she is a member of the community and her mother is a huge member of the community. I feel like that will help a lot with trust and with outreach and with trying to get different voices of families who maybe wouldn't normally be active in the schools.
And to be honest, I mean, as much as I think this is great, I worry about the requirements that they're putting here, especially in the creation of bylaws, in, I don't know if you've got articles of organization, like a not-for-profit would, or whether you're going to have goals and objectives, but that's a very specialized area and for the leadership piece, and I would hate to see us go out and try to create this group and not give the support where our families are going to find success. Because I think that, if anything, it's going to backfire on what the state is trying to do. So do you know if the state is offering any resources at all?
Not yet. The good thing about the state on this one is the Office of English Language Learners absolutely understands that just like our students, English language learners come in all shapes and sizes. So some might come and they were activists in their country and they're literate and they have master's degrees, and some may come to us that feel strongly and advocate for their children but might not have as many of those tools readily available. So they do know, and I think we have, as long as the state's usually generally pretty good. As long as you show you're making progress, they leave you alone. So I think our first step that we have a bilingual support specialist, that we're going to hold meetings. They know they have to help us with the bylaws because they know we don't, how would we know that? Like, we're not politicians. So they do know. So they know, I think as long as we show that we're making progress, we will be okay. I think 5 years down the road, if nothing's happened, I think that's when it would be a problem.
Okay. I would like to maybe suggest that we ask Kelly to come back in, maybe 6 months or something, just to check in, to see if you're feeling supported and
Thank you.
your person is feeling supported, and just the progress that we're making. Because as much as I think this is great, it gives me concern.
I just want to now chime in. I have the same concerns. I have a whole list of everything Pauline just said, probably. And I know this is kind of new, but I don't think, a couple things I want to add. The state has a tendency to do that sometimes. In banking, they did that. Every time something new came out, we had to develop the procedures, the bylaws, whatever. So for schools, for this to be new for schools, is no surprise to me. But they do give you guidelines. It comes out in bits and pieces, and eventually something comes together. So I want you to know you have our support. And I don't know, I think one of us should be assigned to help with this so that we keep this on the forefront. over 30% of our enrollment is EL. Am I right? 500 out of 1,500 students?
Well, it's not 500. It's probably 350. We won't know until the start of
numbers come in.
school.
Yeah.
And we
Even
will
more
have an
speak a different
update.
language.
Excuse me. We will have an update in October after the enrollment. That's the typical time that you'll have another ELL report, because that will give you the numbers and staffing levels. And then in the budget discussions, that's when we'll talk about how do we support this.
Yeah. So the concern is there, Kelly, and I just want you to know that we support you and the department, and we are here to help however we can. I think I can make that statement on behalf of all of us, and if I can't, so be it. You have my support.
Thank you.
What you need from me, you just need to ask, and I'm there. There's a lot. It's a lot on her plate. It's a lot on that area.
I'm going to add, it is a lot on her plate, but it's a lot on everybody's plate.
That's why I say
And,
it's our responsibility.
There's a great deal of work. You made reference, Kelly, to the translator interpreter class, and I thought you might take a second to expand on the collaboration between
Yeah, that was
ELL
great. In the community school.
and the community school.
And also Mr. Kozort. So we recognize that we have a shortage of translators and interpreters on the island, but we do have a lot of bilingual people. Taking the classes to be a certified translator costs a lot of money, especially when you have to go to Boston. So Mr. Kozor agreed to partially finance this class. So really it would cost like $2,500 if you were to sign up to take it in Boston. He's going to supplement some of it, and then we worked with a community school who totally organized it, which was huge. Largely, that's the support I need. Like sometimes it's just those little things that would take me 4 hours to, not even, it's probably 30 hours, the back and forth emails, the this, the that, like. So the community school is totally running all of that. And how many people do we have signed up? Because we meant to meet. I think about 15 people, and we're going to run, it's going to be Spanish and Portuguese, and some people will take it and pay because they just want to pay. Some people will take it and then, kind of like the community school did with the TESOL classes, they will then kind of owe us.
Provide
Like
in
30
kind.
hours, I think, over 2 years, or 30 hours a year of translation and interpretation. So then that means when we have open houses and parent conferences, we'll have certified interpreter translators, and that way we won't get in trouble with the state too, because they have to be certified. So really exciting. And then some of our students through the innovation pathway are also going to be eligible to take it, because we need certified translators in hospitals in the maritime industry. And we have already 2 kids who just graduated this past June who are signed up, and 2 of our employees are also signed up. So it's really exciting.
Thank you.
Did you know that this was coming?
We didn't know they were going to tack everything on. I mean, the state tells us a lot. We were all hoping for the seal of biliteracy. Most of us who are ESL people also are linguists and studied and or taught foreign languages in part of our lives. So we all see the value in being bilingual and seeing bilingualism as an asset, and not just for the white kids who happen to learn Chinese, but for the kids who grow up speaking a language, and we pretty much pull that language out of them as we force only English. So we see this as a way of joining world language with ESL people, saying we need to honor all languages and kind of grow our departments more in the future. We knew that there were going to be new benchmarks under ESSA, and the state has been asking for, that's the Every Student Succeeds Act, the replacement for No Child Left Behind. And we were wondering what was going to happen with the benchmarks. We didn't know they were going to make us monitor. Person who cares about my kids, my students, our students' success absolutely loves that we're going to monitor and look closely. L director who has 50,000 other things to do is like, oh my God, this is another thing, because now I have to train staff. It's another piece of monitoring. Some schools have systems set up where it's easy for me to go in to the 6th grade CPT. That's easy. I go in, the CPT leader organizes it, and they're done super clean, perfectly, no problem. Other places, building systems is a little bit more tricky. So I'm like, so there's good and bad to all of it. It's a lot more work, but ultimately it's good for our kids, so that's what matters. But yes, I'm worried about the amount of work that went through this new law. And oftentimes the state does it, as advocate for students, we all are on board. When it comes just on our shoulders, most of us are like, this, it takes a village.
Absolutely. Thank you,
So we'll
Kelly.
leave it that Kelly can reach out to us.
Yeah, and I like the idea, and this is something we've talked about in the past as a board, is having one of our board members at least sit in on the meeting so we can see
Mhm.
what's happening and report back to the rest of the school committee.
Great. Thank
So
you.
please keep that in mind as things progress. That would be great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Jenny.
Thanks.
Do you need some assistance?
I'm good. Whoops. Oh, am I knocking everything over? I can bend now. It's all awesome. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kelly.
Thanks, you guys.
All right, I'd like to invite Martin up for our fourth quarter budget update. Welcome, Martin.
Good evening, thank you. As you have seen from the documents that we sent last week, we finished the year expanding the school budget 100% this year. 79% of the 27,486 325 that were expended went for payroll, and the rest of it was for operating expenses. It's typical for Nantucket. It always has been between 79 and 80% of the budget to go towards salaries. At the annual town meeting this year, I think the biggest use of end-of-year funding that Mike prioritized from last year, actually, if we had it, was the creation of the special reserve account for special education. It was authorized, and now we will transfer $250,000 from the 2018 budget and create it, and we can contribute in the future if it's deemed necessary. It provides a cushion against unanticipated expenses. This is our biggest, one of the biggest unknowns every year is special education tuition expenses. Other funding that were available at the end of the year were used for the Mac Lab at the high school, equipment purchases, technology, network infrastructure. Also, we did, working together with Diana O'Neill, we did change the lighting this year. The school changed the lighting in the auditorium. This was long overdue. These lights are 25, 27 years old. And now we have LED lighting, which triggered another rebate from National Grid of $23,500. So it's a great project. I was actually at a ballet that was done there. It works great. So other things that were purchased were just equipment purchases for the grounds crew, for the facilities department, also radios for the school buses to be able to communicate, as we have struggled with coverage for the existing units within the Cape Cod Collaborative buses. So now there is a dedicated channel in each bus that is just for Nantucket drivers. Before that, they were all on one channel with all the Cape Cod Collaborative drivers, so it became very noisy and a lot of, it would be difficult to communicate, yes. Those were installed last week. Additional projects that were completed this year were the painting of the, at the elementary school, and other smaller projects. For the Nantucket Education Trust, for the cow pond units, Mike discussed, and we were able to purchase 8 heaters for 8 units this year. So that was
Water heaters.
yeah.
Yeah.
So the community school, and you can interrupt me if you have any questions about the each individual end of year report that I do. The community school this year had a great year. It was close to $169,000 turnaround from the last year. As you know, the past 2 years have been challenging. There were 2 consecutive years of deficits, and this year the surplus is over $76,000. I think it's a great testament. The team, together with Mike, got to work much closer with the team at the community school, and we we were impressed with how focused they stayed throughout the process. Tracy came on board. She's been an excellent addition to the community school, and it's exciting. It's exciting that the organization has completely turned the corner, and we're very optimistic for the upcoming year as well. The total gifts that were given, I know Pauline always asks what happens with these donation lines. We received $58,300 this year for the community school, mostly from the Community Foundation for Nantucket. They were given for different purposes and expanded appropriately for adult education, ESL learning, for the Welcome Baby program, and what was there? And adult ed. As well. Of those, about 6,000 are still available for the Welcome Baby program, as this is ongoing in this fiscal year as well. The main drivers, as you've seen from the report, a lot of programs did great. Adult ed, in particular, saw a huge turnaround, extended day, summer camp, and the pool revolver. The school lunch program was always my biggest concern throughout the year. We came with a little over $54,000 deficit there, which is about $2,000 under the contractually agreed upon subsidy. And different challenges to the program through the year, mostly staffing, but we came within the budgeted subsidy. We had a meeting yesterday at Mr. Kozart's office with the district director and the food service director, and they are encouraged. They feel like the staffing levels are appropriate for the upcoming year, so hopefully it stays that way. Free and reduced, I know Tim is not here. Free and reduced this year increased by another 4%. This is a result of better identification and also the direct certification process that the state does. Those drove the increase in revenues as well. Reimbursements increased this year. Federal and state reimbursements for the district increased by $31,000. So this is all I have. If you have any questions?
Any questions, Steve? Comments?
Only, is this also the food service update, or is that another?
Yeah, they're all involved. They're all
Agenda
part of
item.
one report. We list them separate items, but because they are in a way, but I always include them in the same report.
Okay, so that takes care of that item as well, does it?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
I just have one request. I was hoping that maybe you can adjust this just a little bit to mention that whole lighting thing in the National Grid, 23,000. It's not in here in the summary, and I think it's good information to have for the record that's put out on the site. Do you guys mind
Yeah, absolutely.
if you could just put it in there?
Okay. I can talk about this. I know the amounts that we expended.
You did. You already. I just thought for record's sake, I'm like a black and white paper type person, and I refer back sometimes, and I
Okay.
wouldn't remember that. And I was hoping you would just put it in the summary in that portion.
Okay, I will.
Just that one sentence.
I'll send it. Do you want me to send it separately, or for future references when
For
I do
future
reports?
reference, and
to
if you
point
wouldn't mind adjusting this one
Okay.
for the record.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Pauline?
No, just other than great news on community school. Congratulations. And these are just not, I mean, these are significant increases, significant. So well done to you and your team. And I think everything else, I mean, I think the school lunch program, I love the fact that we're growing in that percentage for free or reduced. It means that we're reaching more families and ultimately giving us more reimbursement. So that's great. And I think we'll figure out the teething problems of the additional staff. And of course, you had the inventory that you had to purchase for the new school. And so,
I agree, Pauline. There were a lot of one-time expenses that we hopefully won't happen again next year. So we'll see how. I'm always cautious to talk about the school lunch program and trying to forecast how it's gonna be financially, because the unknown there, like I said, the biggest challenge is staffing. So.
yeah. And I have to say, I'm very proud of our school lunch program. And there's something recently that's been going around social media around school lunches and scaring people that students that are on free and reduced or not recognized as free and reduced who have deposits in their accounts, that the trays get picked up and thrown in the garbage, and, and there's, of course, everyone's jumping in on comments. And I'm just proud to know that that's not at Nantucket Public Schools. And I know that it wasn't a Nantucket posting, it was just something going, viral for schools and schools coming back in. But I think it's a very delicate area that we need to be very sensitive to students, either who are new to the district or whose parents may not be aware of the free and reduced program. But I'm proud to know that our lunch program does not discriminate at all with any of our students, and everyone is supported and treated in a dignified way, and that makes me feel good.
Sarah Erickson has done a great job in that aspect as well, being bilingual and communicating with parents and students. It's been a huge addition for the school district. Her communicating and I think it's been a positive change, as you saw from my reports on the audit as well. On the school lunch program, we underwent this year a state audit and a separate audit, and she's done a great job.
And I would hope that our staff who are in the lunchrooms are encouraged and reminded to keep an eye on children who are eating and not eating and following up, because I'm sure we're missing some. But anyway, thank you.
Madam Chairperson, I guess I do have a question. I don't completely understand the $250,000 reserve. It says it was taken from FY18 funds.
Yes.
So from this past year's budget, and it's carried forward in case we need it
Yes.
during FY19. Is that the idea?
It's carried forward indefinite. It operates as an account which crosses fiscal years and doesn't need to zero out at the end. Our budget is a fiscal year end budget, so when the fiscal year end closes, whatever we've expended and done, the rest of it, this budget is done for the year. We cannot go back to it, and any unexpended budget would fall for the free cash calculation for the town. The reserve account is a separate entity. It operates as a fund that's under the auspice of the treasurer, who would invest the funds. And if we need to go there in future years, not just in 19, but in any future year, if there is a shortage, all we need is a vote of the school committee and the finance committee. Actually, no, the board of selectmen, to authorize use of these funds. We can have there more money than the 250 we transferred if needed in the future. So it's a account that doesn't expire. It doesn't have an expiration date.
And if
in that
we
aspect.
were to spend X dollars from that account at the end of that fiscal year, would we have to top it up?
Well, if we're expanding this year, this would mean we don't have sufficient funds in the budget, so we'll have to wait for a subsequent year to replenish the funds, or ask town for additional funding to just be put in that reserve account. This was to authorize and create the account.
So the idea behind it, Steve, was that we're doing budgeting in starting in October, November for the following year. Once that budget is set, whether it's $750,000 for residential placements, if children move into the district that we don't know about and hadn't forecast, we will have a place to go rather than finding that money, because that obligation would be ours whether we have the money or not. That, in the past, you would have to take that money out of the operating budget, which means you were robbing from Peter to pay Paul, so to speak, because that was an obligation we had to meet. So now, being able to do this provides some comfort that if a catastrophic expense came in, you could handle it. Now, if it's out of state, that's more problematic than if it's in state, a student moving from in state. But if somebody came from New Jersey and was in Crotched Mountain Rehab Center for $200,000, that we hadn't budgeted. So now we have this, something that New Hampshire had allowed for years, and this past year was the first time that Massachusetts general law allowed for us to set it up.
And so did we find that 250 in this past budget, or did town meeting give it to
No,
us?
at the
We
end,
had
it
it.
was in this past budget at the end of the year.
Ah, okay.
Now, we might have only put 100,000 in, or we might have put 150,000 in, but we chose to take 250,000. And what's interesting is that sometimes that's actually the savings from not using money for residential placement in one fiscal year, forwarding it, allowing for you to carry it over. That's the big difference, because as Martin said, otherwise, that money goes back to town
Right.
coffers for free cash. So I think it's something we had talked about during budget, and I'm excited that we were able to do it. There is a point of diminishing return as to whether you would keep adding money in that. If you keep adding money, then I think you might be saying, well, did we budget well? And what else could it have gone to? So I don't think you want to build it up to $1 million, because then you might tend to go to that well rather than properly budget for residential placements. But I think it gives this school committee and this district peace of mind for something that is unanticipated. And that it's
And I can remember years that we had issues with that.
Yeah.
And this takes some of that pressure off for sure.
It does. The other thing, Madam Chair, if I may, kudos, of course, to Tracy, Martin's already said that, and her team, who have tightened some things up and are doing a good job monitoring not only the revenues, but their expenditures. And just want to give a little shout out to Linda Peterson. She worked incredibly hard to help us come under that subsidy. And every little comment by anybody to her in appreciation, I think, would be well served. She wears her heart on her sleeve and would work herself to death, and we can't let that happen. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you very much, Martin.
Thank you.
School handbook revisions. We start with NES and move our way up. Welcome.
Welcome.
Hi, Kim.
Hi. So, while there is some yellow throughout, I tried to leave highlighted things in yellow. There's really two small things and one large thing to consider other than changing names, dates, terms, and such. So, page 6 is for the school committee. On page 8 in our handbook, we changed this year through conversation with the admin team. Our conferences, parent conferences, will now happen in December. And our hope in doing them in December is to step away from the earlier kind of hopes and dreams with parents, because we have other avenues to collect that information, to do December conferences where we will have the opportunity to really explain the standards-based report card and help our parents understand the way we are evaluating students. The page 9 is just school council. We used,
thing.
yep.
It's page 6. I don't know if the dates are right.
They're not right. They're
Oh,
not right.
great, give me new ones.
I think Jen
Because I solicited those from others, but
Jen and Steve are 21.
I was going to say,
Yes.
that's
They
a
just got
complete
elected.
change of the board in 2020, huh?
I'm like, we all don't expire at the same time. That's what I.
no, I know that, and I got nervous about that, but I asked, so I'll just make those changes.
Just a
Because I actually have made another change since on page 9, which is school council. We used to do our school council at 3 o'clock. Then we moved on Thursdays, and we moved our staff meetings to Thursdays. But we are going to keep school councils running at 4 Thursdays. So Steve was,
2021.
yep,
Yep.
And Jen.
and Jen
2021.
2021. Thank you. So I made the other change to, on page 9, from 3 to 4 to 4 to 5. And the same thing for the joint council.
Thank you.
Thank you. I changed some names, so on page 11, it's Tracy Roberts. And then here is, I would say, the largest change in our handbook. First, that our pre-K programs now are running 7:45 to 12:30 p.m., and that is a shift. We used to be 7:35 till 11, and so now we will be keeping our students longer. We will still have Monday to Thursday programs. We will have a Monday, Wednesday, Friday program, a Tuesday, Thursday program. We're trying to do as much as we can to meet the differentiated needs of our kids, ages 3, ages 4, and ages 5. And we're very excited because community school is partnering with us, which I think will help us get where we hope to be in the future, but they are assisting us with doing a pre-K extended day so that our students can leave at 12:30 but still have care and coverage in the building through 5:15, much like the kindergarten through. Well, it's K through 5, but it's mostly K to 3 kids who go to
That's
that.
fantastic.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
we're
big.
very, very excited about
I
it.
can imagine families are very happy about
Yeah.
that.
And then-
Transition.
I'm sorry?
This is a seamless transition.
Yeah,
It's
it's
great.
fantastic. And then the biggest thing you have seen before, and that is on 12 and 13. And this has to do with the changes in security that we implemented in April of last year. And so it is everything that we did then, everything I talked to you about then that was well-researched, and all the stakeholders were involved, and we did all the necessary tweaking we had to do, and it was very smooth. Rest assured, September will look a little different because we will be welcoming some new families, our K families, in. And we've already sent letters to them telling them this will really go into effect. I believe it's the 24th of September with the open house day, where we will reiterate that to them. But we've sent a letter stating.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments on the NES handbook, Steve?
I just wonder how your drop-off experience is in the morning. I remember that being a real issue at CPS with lots of kids showing up a lot earlier than they should. Are you having issues with that?
We do not, and we typically have not, because we have breakfast buddies in our building. And at an IS meeting, we arrange for kids to arrive as early as 7 a.m. And the parents complete the forms. So anyone who needs that early drop-off has a place to come in and go and be safe and supervised. And then when we made our shift to the much tighter security around that, parents just adapted their times, and we didn't have a lot that would arrive before 7:35.
Good.
A few, and then we would talk to them directly.
Thank you.
Pauline?
I'm good.
No, I'm good. We're not voting on this tonight, right? This is
No.
just- Okay.
Preview.
Like sharing the changes we've
Yep.
made so far.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Eve Marie?
Thank you, Kim.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi, everybody. How are you?
Good.
Good. So we started with changing our picture on the front because now there's a sign in the picture. And last year at this time, the sign wasn't up yet. So, oh, oops, that is in a tough spot. Thank you.
There you go.
Good catch, Peter.
Thank you. Averted an accident. Yikes.
All right.
All right, I'm back.
Still here.
And safe. Thank you. So although we thought this year we might have sweeping changes to the handbook, we actually do not. We talked at our school council meetings about changes, and there were lots of suggestions, which led us to the idea that it's a bigger conversation that should be had with our staff and our families for whom the book is for, to get some feedback before sweeping changes occur. You'll see many of the same changes that Kim spoke of with regard to dates, December conferences, name changes. And then there are some, unless you see something big, there were some small changes, like we added our go bags on page 38, just to, if there's a fire drill, take a class attendance list and your go bag, which we didn't have last year.
Page 42 has my concern.
42. Yes, so we had to change this to match the school policy. We had a situation this year where our $20 in our handbook did not align with the school policy that lists it as at 50, so we need to be in agreement with the school policy. And
Let's look at that.
yeah,
Well, at least we need to change the handbook for
Be
NES
consistent,
and
yeah.
be consistent
We
at all
actually
schools.
don't. We do 20 in our building, and it's really to go to contact parents and to start building the necessity of you need to stay on top of that.
But we have to be consistent.
Right, I think we should have a.
I think we should look at the policy.
yeah,
I
we
think
we
subcommittee
prefer the
can look at the
$20
policy,
just to start the conversation, which we do have the conversation, but it says they'll get an alternative lunch at 20, and the policy says 50, so we need to stick with the policy.
Yeah, I'm not sure that the policy has to change. I think the handbooks, both handbooks have to reflect the policy.
Right, I agree with
Right,
that.
right.
But I mean, if that
Zona's
policy is 50,
thinking
maybe
$50
too
is
high.
too much, is what Zona's thinking.
That's all. And it's just,
Well, that
One
goes
woman's
back to what Pauline was talking about, and there is a lot of video coverage and social media coverage of the term is shaming. That is what's going viral, and I think it's a delicate balance. On one hand, you're trying to keep the debts from rising, and on the other hand, and so you need to hold parents responsible, but without punishing children. So it's a very delicate. This school committee, some members will remember years ago when we had approaching $80,000 in lunch debts, and we've reduced that to under 5,000.
right.
Um,
And now back up a little bit, but here's the thing.
Yeah.
If every handbook had 20, which I'm assuming it did, do you guys recall? Okay. That we did really well, and we didn't shame anyone that can post it anyway on Facebook.
Mike, can you
Just kidding.
remind
I don't
me,
think
this number
Nantucket-
came down significantly. It was much higher than 50 to begin with.
I think it was always 50, if I recall when my kids were in school.
Well,
It wasn't
there was a charging, we started backing off of some of the charging, particularly at the middle and high school, eliminated it completely.
No, that's a good
And
question.
I would have to look at that to tell you
Yeah, I
where
feel
it came
like,
from.
you
Yeah.
know, years ago, it was a lot higher and we dropped it down to 50.
So how about we leave it that Mike will get back to you all to make sure everybody has the same thing in their book once we've had a look-see and a quick discussion, maybe?
But there's written school committee policy that it should be
Yes,
50
50.
bucks.
Yes.
Then I think all the handbooks do have to
Reflect.
say that.
Yes.
I had a question though. 50 bucks reflects how many lunches? What's a typical
$3
lunch
and-
cost?
Some sense. isn't-
250
Two-
for children.
At high school, it's like $3.10, $3.20 or something per lunch. It's in the $3 range, I recall.
I think it's up to 4.
So I mean, you're talking,
But you're the only one that pays that much, John.
you're talking weeks of
Exactly.
non-payment
Right.
before you get to 50
That's,
bucks.
that's
Right.
what, that's why I
So
say
that's
it's.
certainly a point at which you want to be doing something.
Well, that's why I think it's kind of maybe sort of too high, but again, I'm
Okay,
agreeable to
we'll
whatever
talk
you
about
guys
it at the policy.
agree with.
Yeah,
sure.
well,
Maybe you
Bring
guys
that
talk
up
about
at-
it in policy committee.
yes.
Okay.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
My other thing,
Yeah,
sorry.
sure, go
It
ahead.
does say family handbook. Well, I think that's a nice gesture, but does the policy say family handbook?
Is there a policy about that? I don't know.
There is. I think we refer
have
to
to
it as a
check.
parent handbook in our policy, where we talk about handbooks.
Yes. I think it is referred to as parent
I
handbook.
think we changed it to reflect the
It's
Variety
for the
of
student and the parent.
families,
So
for
that's
students.
interesting.
So maybe
Back to
we
the
need to
policy
look
committee.
at
Back to the policy committee.
subcommittee.
I think we changed it last
Never
year.
gonna
So we'll
believe in
we'll
yourself.
agree.
You won't if you perseverate over such things as parent or family.
Okay.
I'm just all about
Thank you
consistency.
very
Yeah.
much. Great.
Next.
Could I ask, do you have, and it's easier to ask all four of you at the same time, do you still have parents sign a document that said, we've received and read this?
No. But we've talked,
We've talked
I
about
think
doing
it's an
that
ask.
actually, and that's one of the changes that
we gotta make.
we're going to make, so. Yep. And of course, that doesn't guarantee you that they have, but it.
In fact, it doesn't tell you anything at all.
Right.
But we did used to
It's
do
a
that.
layer of,
Protections
Yep.
in case something happens.
Right. Once again, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Peter.
students do not, and not unless they're of age.
Welcome.
Thanks. So our school council intended to do a more comprehensive review of our handbook, but we did surveys of parents and students and teachers, and so we got bogged down in looking at that survey data. So we've delayed that overhaul of our handbook till this year. So our school count, you can expect at this time next year, we'll have a lot more changes because we're going to do a more comprehensive review cover to cover. So the reason you only see a couple of very minor tweaks is because of that. We just didn't get to that last year. So our changes are about dress code, trying to align our dress code with the high school's dress code, and to try to adapt to ever-changing fashion trends.
Yeah, whatever.
Good luck.
Yes, this is our favorite topic, Zona. So we added the bit about jeans in particular, and the rips are no longer just in the knees, and they just aren't appropriate for school. And so enforcement's tricky, but we do our best to appropriately address it, and kids do call home frequently. Fortunately, on the island, the weather is really only an issue at the start of school, at the end of school. So for the most part, dress code's pretty good at the middle school. We're going to continue to look at school uniforms. I came pretty close because I started to get pretty exasperated in the spring about dress code issues to just pulling the trigger, but we've had committees and we've looked at it, and we didn't move forward because we
Right.
ran into like all of the issues that school uniforms brings up. But what I'm interested in doing is working with a committee of people again to explore not uniforms in a traditional sense where people hear that word and they think like plaid skirts and white blouses and things like that, but in a pretty extensive menu of options, affordable options of clothes that kids like, that kids had input in selecting, that are school appropriate, so that you know that if you're buying off of that menu, like you're good to go. And there are a bunch of companies that offer this online. So we're going to keep exploring it. The most encouraging thing that happened was, I think I shared it offline with Zona, is early in the year, and then periodically throughout, a couple of students would write me letters, handwritten letters, which is a lost art, saying, Dr. Cohen, can we have school uniforms? Many of the students that have gone to school in their earlier childhood in Jamaica are used to uniforms, and some students from Jamaica have approached me, but other students as well have said that they think it would be easier, and that we would look more proper, and just things that like we as adults are talking about, the kids are starting to say, because I think they get stressed out about some of the fashions and what to wear in the morning, particularly at middle school age. So I don't know if it'll happen, but we're definitely going to continue the conversation, and so we allude to that conversation in our
I think
handbook.
it's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions, comments?
Well, comment, as a former civil libertarian who thought uniforms were a violation of all kinds of civil rights, I have to say I've come around to being willing to consider
You know-
some system.
You know, Steve,
That happened a couple of years ago.
this is
so
my favorite school
I've been
committee
saying-
meeting ever because I totally agree. I was the same way and have now started to see some benefits. Isn't that great when we
Definitely
can
worth-
Nona, they're finally coming
my
around.
Conversation.
mark the time
So that light,
at the record show?
I feel like you
it
guys
is.
looked at us like we were crazy when we brought this up.
alien.
I know. Thank you
Yes.
very much.
You got it.
John? Oh, perfect. Okay.
Jen, just be careful.
I'm not as graceful as Eve Marie, so I'm going to scooch over towards you. So, okay? Because I will fall over on camera. Okay. So you have before you the updates we made to 8 sections of the high school handbook that was proposed to the school council in June. The first being regarding computers, laptops, tablets, and then we wanted to add smartphones and smart watches, which I don't want to say became an issue this past year, but something that arose that we just weren't thinking of during testing situations, kids with the smart watches. Now, we didn't catch anyone using them inappropriately, but they certainly did have access to information that we wouldn't want them to have access to, and so we wanted to include that in the handbook. The other piece that we adjusted in this section is that we used to ask that parents come and pick up the cell phones if a student is using an electronic device inappropriately, and we then confiscate that device. We were asking parents to come in, and we felt like at the high school, students could come and get their device at the end of the school day if it was confiscated throughout the day. So we did change that. And then I also wanted to add a section about the loaner program regarding students signing out the loaner devices. So in some situations, we had students, first of all, the loaner program is for any student who has a device that is out for repair. They can then go and use a loaner. In some cases, students were not registering their personal device, nor registering to get a one-to-one Chromebook, and then using the loaner program as their device. And so we wanted to add some language to the handbook that just simply said the loaner program is just that, for loaner and not for your daily use throughout the school year. So we added language about that. We also discussed language around our of-age students. And so in the high school, when students become 18, there's this tendency at times for them to come and go or think they can come and go as they please. And so there really wasn't very specific language around that. And I wanted to be clear that once you turn 18, you can, in fact, sign yourself out. You don't need a parent to do that. But you do need to sign out. You can't just leave school. I need to know that you're leaving school. The expectation is that you're here till the end of the school day, and the same circumstances apply to anybody else. You can leave school if you're ill, if you have to go off island, if you have an appointment, but you do need to have document that, and you need to sign out at the front office so that I know that a student isn't in school. So we don't want parents thinking their kid's in school and they're not, or me thinking a student is in school and they're not. If we have an emergency, I need to know who's here and who isn't here. So I wanted to make sure there was clear language so that we could account for our of-age students at the high school.
So Jen, if I may, even if a student is 18, they can sign themselves out, but they have to have a reason. Dentist
yes.
appointment,
Yes.
doctor's appointment, something.
Yes.
And can they just say that?
No, it says it in the paragraph. It has to be dismissed by a nurse if it's an illness.
Well, if an illness, but if they have a dental appointment,
Potentially, there are ways around that.
I'm just
But
curious.
at the very least, they've stated a reason, a
Yep,
legitimate
okay.
reason, and I have document that they've signed out. They're no longer in the
Yep.
building. I just wanted to keep track of the comings and goings. I wanted to deter students from thinking, I don't really feel like going to advisory today, or I have a certain class and then I have another class after that, so I might take an extended lunch and then come back. I wanted students to be held more accountable for their attendance in classes throughout the school day. I don't think, it wasn't overly abused, but there were a handful of kids that consistently, once they turned 18,
decided to come and go. And I wanted to just be clear about the regulation around
Still
that.
have to go through the office to do it.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
To
I
put
just
it
need to
simply.
know who's in the school, who's
Yep.
not in the
That
school.
is a great safety measure, like you said, absolutely,
Right.
to know who's in the building.
If there's an emergency and I don't know that
Right.
students have left the building, then I'm thinking they're somewhere
In the
they're
building.
not. Right. With the dress code, I'm a stickler about the dress code. I was at the middle school and I am at the high school. Unfortunately, I don't check kids into the school each day. So things come to my attention as I personally see them or as teachers bring that to my attention. We work with the teachers to encourage them to address dress code violations within the classroom. I think it's best if they're having those conversations with students. Sometimes teachers aren't comfortable with that, or the violation is egregious and they feel more comfortable with me addressing it, and or the student is a repeat offender. And so they'll send the student down to me, and then I have those conversations with the student, either help them to find alternate clothing or get clothing brought into them. But I did adjust the highlighted statement to take out specific types of clothing, halter tops, tube top, muscle shirts, and keep it more to a general statement, which is specific but general. Bare midriffs, cleavage, and any clothing which allows underwear to be exposed.
My only concern there
Mm-hmm.
is that it sounds geared towards women, and I have a problem with that.
Okay,
So I don't know how, if we just say any clothing, or if you need to say some male and female things. I don't know. I just feel like it's a little gender specific.
Right, right.
Which is not a way we want to go.
Yep.
I would just interject that actually that very last phrase, which allows underwear to be exposed, are also prohibited, is probably directed more at the boys than it is.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So take out the bare midriff and cleavage and just say any clothing which allows underwear to be exposed, but then that doesn't, cleavage isn't necessarily underwear.
Right, I was thinking,
I just, if that's what we had before and we said muscle shirts, which was probably the only thing that was, you know what I'm saying?
yeah.
If you can find more, then you can put
I
more.
took out the specific clothing mainly because there are other types of clothing that are now more fashionable and tube tops. They tend not to be wearing tube tops, but there are other
I know.
clothing that are just as revealing. So I took out the specific types of clothing and kept it more general, but I do understand what you're saying about the midriffs and the cleavage, and I don't know if we can come up with language that talks about excessive skin
Yeah,
showing.
too much skin. I mean, what
But we definitely can think about that.
troubles me, Zona, about what you're saying, although I agree that's pretty female oriented, the first part, is if we don't have that language, are we not giving the students enough direction?
I know, I feel the same way. I'm just saying. I think we need to say it, but we need to, I'll be all encompassing.
Yep.
That's all. I was thinking thongs too, but up here, when you say this thing about buttocks, I like the 5 Bs. I like that thing you took from Littleton High School handbook.
What's that?
But at the very top, it says the 5 Bs should never be visible. Buttocks,
Yeah.
bellies, breasts, bare backs, or boxers. I kind of like that.
Yeah. Okay.
I just, again, to err on the side of caution, it just sounds gender specific more
Yeah.
so than not.
Okay.
So think about it.
Yes,
Figure it out.
absolutely. In that same vein, with the hats, we had bandanas and do-rags in our handbook. They weren't allowed. But I have lots of females that would like to wear scarves on their heads. But then boys weren't being allowed to wear bandanas. And I didn't feel comfortable telling the females that they couldn't wear the scarves on their heads. And they were coming to me asking if they could have permission to do that. And so then I felt like we should just take out bandanas and do-rags. It doesn't seem to be an issue. It's not something that's a distraction in schools.
Does that mean you allow scarves?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So I felt like to make that equitable between the males and the females, that I would just take that piece out.
I just don't know if I even like scarves, but that's me. It's a personal thing.
Females wearing scarf or anybody wearing
Yeah.
scarf.
Anybody wearing any headgear in school. But that's just me again. You know.
Yeah. The females were, to be honest, the females were coming to me concerned about their hair and in states of their
Disarray,
hair.
I know.
Yes. And so I just wanted to be sensitive to that, and they were asking me if they could do that.
And
So I
hasn't
thought I'll
been an
just
issue or a distraction.
there were a time where we were concerned with gang colors and bandanas and things like that, and that was more of an issue, and it doesn't seem to be an issue, thankfully, now, so we took that out.
Okay.
And then the statement about promotional buttons was taken out. That doesn't seem to be an issue right now.
Kids don't wear buttons anymore.
They don't wear buttons anymore. But we do have some kids that like to wear buttons that support their particular group of interest, and it doesn't seem to really be an issue or disrupting the assembly or a distraction or causing any issue.
Can I just ask a question on
Sure.
that? Would that also include then rainbow buttons for gay rights or?
Correct. And
They
so
would.
they will be allowed to wear
They would.
those. Yes, that's
Okay.
why one of the reasons I took that out is because different groups were wanting to.
And I know our staff also like to wear them as well.
Yes, exactly.
Jen,
Henry,
if I may.
yes.
So I noticed in accessories, it says that bandanas hanging from clothes are prohibited,
Mhm.
but so you can wear them on your head,
Mhm.
but you can't have them in your pocket.
We kept that in there because typically, in relation to gang flying colors, so to speak, that's when they typically would do that. So that's could be discussed. It's tricky. It's tricky. I don't see kids hanging bandanas from their backpacks, to be honest, but that's why that was kept in there as opposed to not wearing it on your head. But it's a good point. It's a very good point. Electronic devices. So we do allow students to use electronic devices during their lunchtime.
Is that new?
Um,
Is that added? You just
It
wasn't
was.
in?
It just wasn't in there,
Okay.
and then there was some confusion. Do we let them? Do we not let them? And so then I wanted it to be clear that we are allowing kids to use their electronic devices during lunchtime. I think there was concern that lunch is a time we want them to be more social, and I assure you, as someone who has multiple lunch duties, they're being very social. But they do use it. It gives them, they're less likely to use it during the day if they know at lunchtime I can do all my social media things, I guess. But they can't use it during passing time from class to class. We want them to expeditiously get from one place to the other during the passing times. And it also prevents them from having it out as they enter classes. We want them to put them right in the caddy and not be using them as they're heading into a class. So that was the thought process around that. I took out this whole section about second offense because I don't feel comfortable taking a device for 2 weeks. There was a clause in here about taking it for the remainder of the school year after multiple offenses. I didn't feel comfortable doing that either, so I took that all out. If a student is using a device inappropriately, it's confiscated, it's held, I hold it in my office till the end of the day, they come and get it, they get it back. We have a discussion. Most often, it doesn't happen again. If it does, we have continued discussion. I bring parents in and have conversation with them. We come up with solutions. Do they need to check it in the morning when they come in? They can do that. Do they need to not bring it to school? So we have conversation around that with the student and the parent to help them if they're a chronic offender of this.
We trust your judgment on that.
Thank you. Emergency phone number. I just added a piece. I do worry about my of-age students. Some of them decide that they are going to be independent from their parents, and then I want to be able to contact them. So I want to make sure that they are giving the front office their phone number, their cell phone number, so that we can directly contact them. There are circumstances where I call home and the parent will say, you need to talk to them. That's rare, but it happens. And we also sometimes have 18-year-olds that then move out of the house. And so I just want to make sure I have appropriate contact information. So I just added that in there to the emergency phone number section. Headphones, same thing. If they're confiscated, the student can get them at the end of the school day. And they are able to use them during the lunch block. Tardiness, it formally said Saturday school, which clearly I'm not prepared to enforce, and so I just changed that to in-school suspension for tardiness. And then the one part that really caught me off guard last year as a new assistant principal was the vaping, which I then have included language in the tobacco policy. I'm constantly looking at other schools, their handbooks, how they enforce this to make sure that we are on top of it as far as our language, our procedures, our education for students and parents around this. So that is definitely something that's ongoing for me and was a huge issue last school year.
I just want to make mention that be sure and match it with what we did for the
Yeah.
policy as well, along with, I don't know if weapons is in the handbook or not, because we just revised some of that.
Okay.
And Jen, I'm kind of curious, what made you decide to change allowing headphones or earbuds in the lunchroom? Because I agree that the goal should be to have our students communicating with each other, and okay, if they're using their device to show something on social media, they're still interacting with each other. But I'm afraid when kids put those earbuds in, they are isolating themselves.
Students were coming to me and asking if they could listen to music, asking if lunch could be a time where they listen to music outside. Sometimes they were asking to listen to music in the cafeteria. They wanted just time to just sit and listen to music, and I can't have them music out loud. So they were asking, can I use my headphones? I'd like to listen to music.
I think for some students, it's self-soothing.
Yes,
and it's a
that's
way
what
to
they were
be able
advocating.
It is.
to settle, and I think, you know,
I just
understand
worry
your
about
point. I
students
do.
isolating themselves, and that's just a easy mechanism to separate themselves or seclude themselves from other students. So I worry
Especially with
about
the
that.
concern we had this past year.
I do talk with my lunch duty staff to make sure that they're observant of students eating lunch in groups, and then maybe now they're not eating lunch in groups, or students that are eating lunch in isolation, to make sure that we're picking up on those changes
Thank you. I
as
think
they
that's really
occur,
important.
because I agree
Thank
with
you.
you. We want to make sure that people are not eating alone, but then also not isolating themselves, and
Right.
that if there's something else going on, that we're checking in with that student.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Steve, any questions,
Nope,
comments?
thanks.
All right.
Thank you very much.
thank you, Jen.
I mean, I could say better thee than me. All of the above.
All right. Committee discussions and votes to be taken. So the first vote, we actually don't have the MOU with the Cape Cod Child Development for tonight.
Oh.
So we will move on to voting to approve policies. So this was brought to us, and Zona, thankfully you were at the policy meetings. This was brought at the last meeting. Did anybody have any questions or comments before we vote for this? You guys-
This is the same as we saw
Same,
2
same
weeks
thing.
ago.
Absolutely.
Move to approve
Second.
the military children
Yes, sorry.
policy.
This is policy JFABE. This is educational opportunities for children in military families.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And then JFABF, educational opportunities for children in foster care. May I have a
Move to
motion?
approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And then everybody received these additional items. We need to vote to establish a maximum checking account. So let's see, this is this one right here. So move that in accordance with school district policy JJF, the school committee votes to establish the maximum balance for the student activity checking account at each school as NES 5,000, NIS 5,000, CPS 5,000, and NHS 15,000.
What does that mean exactly? We don't have that paper. We
You
don't
didn't
have
get
that.
this?
No.
No, I did not
Oh, I'm so
include
sorry.
that.
I'm sorry. I thought
Martin, do you want to
did.
speak to it, or do you want me to?
Limits to the checking accounts, they're maintained by the principals, and they are dispersed, they can write checks up to that
Yeah,
amount.
absolutely.
Up to that amount?
The rest of it goes through the warrant process for the town.
Okay.
It's paid, it's all-
So it's check writing amounts?
Yes.
Okay, that makes it better sense.
And the
Right.
maximum for
Balance of the student
NES,
checking
NIS,
account. I gotcha.
CPS 5,000, NHS 15,000.
I don't understand. I mean, when all I'm thinking about is December Delight. Their balances are way higher than that.
No, you're right. I don't think that should actually say balance,
Yeah.
Martin. I think that's a check limit. That's a check limit, so it's not,
Check maximum check limit.
yep.
Okay.
So zone is correct.
And those funds are coming from where?
Fundraising.
I mean, those are school funds, not student activity accounts, correct?
Student activity
They are
accounts.
They are the student activity
Yes.
accounts.
So this is a policy,
Right.
this is stated in JJF, but we are required to act on it annually,
Got it.
just to reestablish those amounts. And one year, several years ago, we did change NHS from 10,000 to 15,000, actually.
Thank you. So may I have a
That makes
motion to approve
I make a motion to approve as presented.
language
What with the
change.
change?
with the
amendment.
language check
Yeah.
limit for student activity checking account?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Okay. All right, so the next one, vote to authorize student activity accounts. So the Nantucket Public Schools hereby request the school committee votes to approve each existing student activity account and that the following activities be added to their respective school student activity accounts. Class of 2022, Nantucket High School moved from CPS. Class of 2025, CPS moved to NIS. Class of 2028, NIS moved from NES. Class of 2031, NES, new pre-K class.
Should that not say the following balances or activity balances or
Are we on
something?
the
We're
other
not
one?
moving
What are we-
activities.
Well, it's only just showing that the money is moving with the student. That's
To
the
the-
purpose.
to the next
I understand that,
school.
but this
It's
says
the
the
account.
activities are doing the moving.
Maybe the wording
this-
isn't perfect.
Well,
the
just
student-
say we just change one word,
But it is the activity account.
following, well,
The
It's
student
their
it's
account
student
that's
activity
following.
account. It's the
Activity
title of the account.
or the balance that's following,
Well, that's
them,
how
not
it's
the
saying.
activity.
That's how I understand this. It's called a student activity account. That's just the
Right.
title.
Right. Agreed.
May I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Thank you, Steve. Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Let's see here. Okay, can we have a vote to accept donation from the Nantucket Land Council for NIS grade 5 students for Water Everywhere, designing water filters in the amount of $2,240?
Motion to accept.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
A vote to accept donation from Nantucket Land Council to NIS for 5th grade nature's classroom trip to help supplement the remaining balance of trip in 2018 in the amount of $4,000.
Motion to accept.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. A vote to accept the donation from Community Foundation for Nantucket for NCS Summer Boost Program in the amount of $10,000.
Motion to accept.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
A motion to approve July 24th, 2018 workshop minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Actually read.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
And a motion to approve August 7th meeting minutes.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Last
Am I
but
the
not
lone eye?
least.
I wasn't
That's the
there.
second time I'm saying the lone eye.
And a vote to approve transfers and invoices.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Super.
Super.
Oh, yes, just a comment again, because this, again, this is a lot of money that's coming to our district from Community Foundation and from Land
great.
Council, and just thank you.
Absolutely.
It's wonderful.
Superintendent's report.
Yes, I do not have the superintendent goals because they really should follow the district goals. And I'll present a draft of the district goals at the next meeting. And then the subsequent meeting, the superintendent's goals will be drawn from the district's goals. On the horizon, you'll see that we have those district goals at September 4th. The technology use, I think that we still want a little bit more time with the draft calendar for 1920, so that may be pushed to the 18th because we want one last opportunity for input from faculty that's just returning. And then we also have the technology use update, and we're hoping to have something from each principal for you to that outlines how much and how technology is used in their building. And then also hope to have Jen and Jamie available to talk about and answer some of the questions that you may have on filtering and specifically with a Chromebook. Okay, so that will be at the next meeting. We will have an enrollment update on September 4th. That'll be our opening day enrollment. Always something that we are interested to see, but it's not a number that is really very reliable, and that's why the October count is used by the Department of Ed, because a lot happens between opening day and that October 1st. You had asked us to meet with the school resource officers, so I have put them on the September 18th agenda, and some of the back channel. I was delighted to forward a message from Chief Pittman that says that we will have 2 school resource officers. That was in question because of the number of resignations the police department has had, and they're strapped for a full complement. But Chief has been, I think, creative and agrees and understands that this is something that is near and dear to the administration and to parents and to the school committee. So he will make every effort, understanding that we don't know what will happen with his staff as we move forward, but glad to have them. And then we will begin the budget development process at the second meeting in September, which really starts with draft directives, and then we start building the calendar. And also at that second meeting in September, we will have a report from community school and summer school talking about their programs, and we've traditionally done that at the second meeting in September. You'll note in October that we should have MCAS results released. If that were to happen in time for the September meeting, the second September meeting, we might do that, but that really depends on the Department of Ed. And something new is that you had asked to meet with the Veritas staff, and so I put that on for October, giving them a little bit of time to get meeting, to start their meetings and have something to report.
Wait, what's the tri-council meeting with Mass? Is that?
Well, I think that's something that we have done before, but we haven't done every year. And that's when we have had Glenn Kuchar come and meet with all of the school councils, and then that evening meet with the school committee about their roles and responsibilities. Haven't done it for a while, so I put it there and can arrange that if that's something
Yeah, I think it's great.
that you would like.
Put it where? I missed that.
It's in the October meeting, so on the other page. And I would have to see which of the October meetings he could make and then coordinate it with administration, with their school councils.
Okay.
As well.
We discussed, and I think it actually is referenced in the minutes, having, I'm not sure what to call this, the CPS behavior and discipline
We talk about
status
student
review, but I don't
Student conduct.
see that here anywhere.
Yes, we did talk about
Conduct.
that. It was student conduct.
At the last meeting, I asked if we could actually have it in September with the meeting, that we have the school resource officers present. And I thought it would be important, at the start of the school year to
Okay. I'll put that on the,
show school committees our support in
I'll put that
what
on
our
for
administrators
the,
need.
for the second September meeting along with the school resource
And do
officers.
we need to talk about the minutes policy coming back to us, or does that just
That's
happen in the
No, that
first?
will, come back, with Zona away. We did not meet as a subcommittee.
So that'll just come back
We
to
will
us
bring
when
that back.
ready.
Yep.
Okay.
And that's all I have to report.
Can I just ask a couple of things?
Sure.
For the technology use for September 4th, can I, through Jen, ask if we could ask Sarah Erickson, I don't know if this is something they have to research, but I'm interested in knowing with the Chromebooks, whether for students who don't have Wi-Fi access at home, whether if they're working on the Chromebooks or Google Docs as part of their homework, whether it gets synced into the server when they return back to the school. I'm just curious. You don't have to answer now, but I'm just thinking for students that don't have access to Wi-Fi at home, and we're providing homework on the Chromebooks, is that something that they can work on the Chromebooks, and then it gets synced into the, if I'm using the right terms, I don't even know if I am. I'm just.
It sounded
Thank
good.
you.
Yeah,
And
I'm
we'll-
following you.
We'll
Paul.
just
synced
take,
to the
we'll just
server.
I'm
address
following
that when we, come back at that meeting.
Yeah,
So yeah,
So all
I
this-
don't need it now, just, I'd
It's on
like.
the same server, it's Google's.
just to prepare
Yeah,
you for
but
the
if you don't have
questions.
Wi-Fi, I'm just looking
If
to
you don't
see.
have
And the other
Wi-Fi.
thing was,
Anyway.
can you block what they have access to?
But you still have.
But I'm happy to email you if I've really
And
just messed that up.
Could I ask through the chair to the principals, one of the things that was asked for was some kind of a survey from the teachers as to how much technology was used during the school day? Is that something that can be ready by the 4th of September? Is it?
We're on the first September meeting or the
The
second?
first September meeting
Well,
is
it's
September
currently
4th.
listed for the
That's-
first one. I
That's where
think.
technology
which
use is
September
under.
4th, right.
We already did.
Well, if you want to push that back, then we need to talk about what we would push forward. And that can be done. I can work with the chair on that, but we can address that if you'd like. Either way, you can.
I mean,
Well, if they feel they need more time, I have no problem with pushing it back.
I just thought it was important, I know it was asked a few meetings ago. We're not talking about a survey from the kids.
Right.
Just the teachers to give us a general idea
Why don't we,
how much it's being
why don't we push it
used
back to the 18th?
during a typical school day.
Answer that question.
And if each teacher could answer that,
Because you have to get that from their teacher.
if that can be ready September 4th, I think we're okay.
Well-
If not,
Well, I'm not sure what you're asking for the report, because I don't know that the administration is going to bring you all the results of that survey, but they're going to summarize the
yeah,
results of the
that's
survey.
fine. That's fine, the average teacher, the average kid, something like that.
I think that's harder to do because the range would be so broad, but we'll give it a try.
We're asking for this information for what reason? Because we think it
Headaches.
might be too much and we would tell the teachers not to use technology.
No,
I don't know if we would
I think
tell
it's
them that,
important
but we
that
just
we just
wanted
get
to
an
know.
idea to gauge how much they're using these
Computers all day and then all home all night.
Chromebooks during the school day. And I know it ranges. It's completely different at NES than it is at CPS, NHS. And it would be nice to have an idea of how much technology is being used during our school day by our students. Just conversation.
But wasn't also STEM based on the number of headaches we were told were being reported for the school year? Weren't there an excessive amount of headaches?
There were. If you
So I
wanted
think
to
we
make
just
that
we just wanted to
correlation.
have an idea
Right, I
to
just
be in
worry
the
that
know.
non-educators making a decision or
I don't think we're making
Yeah,
any decision.
But
I
I'm
don't
just saying,
think we're-
just being informed that headaches can be caused for many reasons. So I'm just,
And I don't think that was that wasn't the basis of having this conversation. I think it's just an interesting conversation to find, how much technology is being used, and if our NIS students are, using maybe a Chromebook 20 minutes, a half hour a day, and then at CPS they're using the Chromebook, in every class, and then taking a Chromebook home. That's a big difference, and it's
And I think
an
it's just
interesting
information
conversation.
gathering. We're not talking about making any decisions policy-wise or otherwise.
No.
But to
Okay,
gather
all right, I
the
just wanted to ask the
information, to
question,
get a
I was wondering
sense,
what you were
because I mean, I know at CPS it varies from teacher to teacher. It can vary hugely
Absolutely.
from
And project
teacher
by
to
project, I would
teacher.
Absolutely,
imagine.
subject to
And
subject.
that's why, if the administrators can give us a sense of that,
Right.
that would just be good information to have.
Perfect. Okay, is there any subcommittee work group?
Did you have something to
Conversation?
say, Mr. Orton?
Well,
I really would like to push this off to the meeting, the technology meeting, and not continue
I
this.
was just going to offer summer school could go on the 4th because we were planning on reporting on the 4th, if that helps.
Summer school.
That'd be
That's
great.
right. That's right. Thank
That'd be
you.
great.
Thank you.
The first day of school is a tough time for administration to collect the information you're looking for. Once school gets up and running, it'd be easier to collect and report out on later in the month.
Great. Thank you very much.
Jen, I have no problem with that being pushed off, but I saw people nodding, saying they could have it ready, so,
So now you got more time.
let's
All right.
officially move it.
Thank you. Subcommittee or work group? Anything going on? Policy is meeting again probably within the next week or two.
And I heard and saw that the doors got numbered. Thank you, Diane.
Yes. Thank you. All right. May I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Just wanted to get an update on new
Oops.
hires.
Sorry.
Sorry. Can you give us an
A quick-
update?
Sure,
Has any
we're,
nothing changes,
it's
maybe
it's a continually moving target. We've had even notification this week of a staff member who may not be returning. And so those are challenges, but then it's 2 steps forward and 1 step back because we have some candidates. I'm doing a Skype with a candidate tomorrow. And I think that Michelle is hoping to meet with a candidate for the speech language position. The one that I'm doing tomorrow is for NIS guidance. We have filled some ESP, administrative assistant positions, and we still have 1 or 2 TA positions. But it's challenging. It's challenging everywhere. If you read any of the blogs or social media, you'll see that hiring teachers across the country is a challenge. And when you add the challenge of Nantucket to that, and when you add the challenge of Nantucket late to that, people get shy about pulling a trigger on that, knowing how challenging housing can be.
Right.
So the late resignations are tough, and they're tough not just on the administration, but tough on their colleagues, and certainly tough for the children.
For the kids, yeah.
All right,
So-
and thank you.
Just lastly, I just want to thank Dr. Bucky for getting back to us with the AP scores
Mhm.
with the inclusion of children on IEPs and 504s. I was happy to see that report and see that we had children represented with IEPs and 504s. So thank you.
Thank you very much. May I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. That was a pitiful.
Michelle.
Favor.
Snap.